Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the Ian Dubé Show. Today is Friday, May 3rd, 2013, and I have the privilege to talk to Dr. Mike Spino, a former coach at Life University, former architect of that world-class power back in the 90s. Wasn't that correct, Mike?
Yes, 90s and early 2000s.
So, Mike was one of the driving forces behind the 1996 Centennial Olympic Games here in Atlanta, Georgia. He served as a coach, an event host, and organizer in numerous national teams, and he researched issues such as heat and humidity, jet lag during the Olympic periods, and in 1984, Mike directed the Atlanta pre-Olympic training camp for 100 athletes and coaches at Emory University, which provided the precursor for Atlanta's successful Olympic Games. So, Mike, you seem like a pretty busy guy, huh?
Well, it's been going on for a while, Ian.
It has been.
And we've been together through a lot of it, through a lot of different periods, and now we're poised to do our legacy work, which is, a very exciting time in our lives.
Right, absolutely. And I see that you're the author of 6 mental books and physical aspects of sport. You've coached hundreds of All-American runners at Georgia Tech, Life University, where your teams have won 12 national cross-country and track championships. And you were chosen NAIA National Coach of the Year 3 times. And you formulated a lot of theories around health and the famed, what is that, Eason Sports Center?
Yes.
In California. And
yes, the Eflin Sports Center.
And the Opus Novum, president, you're in collaboration with the Liège 2 University in France, and you're developing master's degree consortiums and sport tourism research projects. So you seem a very, very busy guy. So let's see here. Let's go back to the beginnings here. Where did you start your coaching career?
Well, the strange thing is that I was very fortunate to train with 2 of the greatest track coaches in history, Percy Wells Cerity of Australia and Mihai Ikloy of Hungary. And after I graduated from Syracuse, I wanted to try to make the Olympic team at 68 and went out to train with Ikloy. It was an exciting time in the United States because a lot of runners like Jim Beatty and different people went to train with Ikloy. Very interesting guy in that in 1955, the theory that he had, his runners broke every world record from the 800 meters to the 10,000 meters. But by the next year, the 56 Olympics, none of them got to the Olympics because Russia invaded Hungary. And so that was an exciting situation. And then Percy Cerity was a legendary coach in Australia, and Coach Herb Elliott, who was many consider to be the greatest miler of all time, broke the world record in the mile by the biggest margin in history. And used a form of mental training to reach his goals. For instance, so I was inspired by those people, and then had the good opportunity in the actually early 1970s. The inner game of sport movement was. I was living in California and teaching there. And the inner game of sport movement became a reality. A group of people got together. They started writing books. Tim Galloway's Inner Game of Tennis, and Michael Murphy, who became my mentor, and I coached him to be a world-class middle-distance runner, had started something called the Esalen Sports Center, which the theme was sport is yoga. It can be used as a form of self-expression. The beginning of my career, I spent most of my time with recreational runners at Esalen and different places. With the Esalen group, I would take workshops in things like meditation and Tai Chi, energy flow, inner high-level physiology, studying the ancient, contemplative studies. And in that situation, started to integrate that into a formula for training. And I was fortunate that a really good friend of mine had started Pro Track ITA in the middle 70s. Jim Carroll, he had been the coach at Yale. And we formulated this conference, which was quite amazing, with the Humanities of the Arts at Oregon. And that's where the pictures from my first book are in there, because we did a conference with Pro Track with Ben Jipjo and Lee Evans, and it was we made a film called Extraordinary Powers. Ben Jipjo, the great Kenyan runner, who kind of helped Kip Keino win the '68 Olympics. He was the greatest Pro Track runner. And for 3 years, we had Pro Track. It used to be Asterix in Track and Field News. And that was kind of my platform. When I moved to Atlanta, I had this feeling in the sense that I wanted to take my classical training with Igloy and Cerruti and apply it to competitive sports. And I was fortunate to start at Georgia Tech when we used to have just a 2-lane track. We used to run underneath the football field. But on that track, that was really not a track. It was just like the whole highway. People like Antonio McKay broke the world's record in the indoor mile. Indoor 400 meters. And we had a lot of All-Americans, and it was really a great situation. So, that led. I was at Georgia Tech when Andrew Young had the sense that we were going to have problems with the a lot of Russia trying to pull teams out of the Olympics. And it was 1984. A friend of mine, Ron Davis, and I had the idea that maybe we could help 2 or 3 teams in East Africa, especially Somalia and Mozambique, where he was coaching, and to train in Atlanta. And it grew into, with the help of the United States Information Agency, it grew into a large camp with 100 athletes and coaches, 10 nations, and many people perceived that was the precursor to the Olympics, and also kept a lot of those countries in the Olympic Games. I remember the day that my good friend Bob Jones from the United States government, USIA, we were working every day. One day the phones went dead. Russia pulled out of our Olympics, was trying to pull all their teams. And we were working with the Supreme Council of Sport in Africa. And Andy Young brought the Lamine Ba, who was the head of the Supreme Council. He came from Cameroon, which is the head of sports professionalism in Africa, and they worked out how the different teams would stay in. They weren't going to give in to the Russians. And our small camp that was just a personal kind of thing was successful, where maybe some big technological fly people all over the place wouldn't have been. So 1984, the Los Angeles Games, we were very close to Seb Coe because his good friend Joe Newton was a famous high school coach. And so it was great to go to L.A. and see Seb win, and that was the build up to the Olympic Games. Ron Davis was in Mozambique, and there was so much politicking, and all of us in Atlanta remember that great day when Samaranch said for the Olympics '96 Atlanta, and everybody went crazy. And then we all remember the signs: 1,000 days to the Olympics, 600 days to the Olympics, and so that's kind of my background. And I've been here in Atlanta for 30 years. I didn't know I was going to stay. I used to teach these workshops, and I was teaching at Hilton Head, and someone invited me to come to Atlanta, and I fell in love with it. I visited a couple of times, and I really liked Atlanta, and I ended up making this home. I've been here for over 30 years now.
Bags by Coach O is proud to announce that we now carry a full line of track and field equipment. We are working in conjunction with MF Athletics. Go to our website and view our new Puma catalog at www.coacho.com.
So you seem like you have now really grown into Atlanta. You've got a vast background. Let's go backwards here. Now, most of us, as we grow up and we develop our coaching acumen, have real key influences in our life. And you came from New Jersey, from some of the research I've done. And in New Jersey, when do you think the coaching bug was set? Who was your greatest influence there?
Yeah, I tell you, it was really amazing, Ian. I went to such a small high school that we didn't have cross country. So one day I don't know where it happened, but I was running in the park, and I met a guy, just a guy in the community, Jerry McCann, and he started coaching me. He had been, he had been trainer and coach at Villanova, and so I trained with him. And the other thing was I trained with the local college team because we didn't have a team. But some people said, "Oh, the poor kid doesn't have a team." But I trained with the college team, and I trained with Jerry, and it was really an advantage. And I went from being a basketball player to being a runner. I remember being inspired by even Roger Bannister breaking the first 4-minute mile. And, the track was only a block from my house. It was kind of a square track. I used to run down there. My mother used to tie me. My mother's still alive. She's 97 years old.
Wow,
Just
God bless.
Just go down the track and tie me, and all of a sudden, I became one of the best runners in the state. And there was a fellow named John Lesherwin, and he and I trained together, raced each other, and we broke the state record in the mile in New Jersey, and got an opportunity to go to Syracuse University, which was a great thing. When I look back, I think maybe for my track career, I should have gone to Villanova, but came close to breaking the 4-minute mile in the middle 60s, training with Igloy after Syracuse. So I guess I'm a journeyman. I went to where the action was happening, and I met people along the way that that were an inspiration to me, not only to myself but my theoretical insights. I was at Esalen Institute and met Michael Murphy. He was a very well-known organizer of this famous institute, and he really got into running. He and I became, he got to be a world-class middle distance runner, and I kept on telling him about Percy Cerity. I kept on saying, there's this guy, Percy Cerity. He does all this mental stuff just like you. He has his great runner, Herb Elliott, visualized that he's St. Francis of Assisi, runs up these sand dunes, makes them go into trances, and he's the greatest runner and coach in the world. And I remember the phone call, the first phone call and letters in the early 70s I got from Percy, because I'd read all his books, and he said he would come to the United States. So I was the last person to train with him, and I remember I got all his letters. In the old days, there was no internet. He had these beautiful English cursive letters that are my deep treasure that I'll always keep and treasure. And he came here. I went back to Port C, where he had this training camp by the sea in Australia. And it was such an amazing thing because he was, I'd grown up with the Eastern coaches, the Jumbo Elliots and the Keegan Gacks at Yale. And it was a great culture also. There's those old, like we talked about, Ian, the old-time East Coast coaches. But Cerity was just amazing. He was just like, like this Swami or this guru, but everything was around track. And he was talking about running being an expression of the arts and running from deep inside yourself. And he had a philosophy called Stonenism, and he taught people to run and gallop. And the story that I've written and talked about a lot of times is how he said John Landy was his first athlete, And Landy didn't really have all the attributes he wanted in his athlete. But then and then of course, John Landy and Roger Bannister first broke 4 minutes for the mile together in a race in Vancouver, and then 2 or 3 years later, he and Herb Elliott found each other, and that's one of the most amazing coach-athlete connections ever in the history of track and field. When Elliott broke the mile by the biggest margin in history, going from 3:57 to 3:54, Percy had him in a trance in a cabin in Ireland for 2 days before the race, and he used to tell us all about it, how he got into this place where he would run the night before and try to kill himself running as an inspiration to Herb Elliott. And the greatest thing, Ian, really is when they had the anniversary of the first 4 minute mile and all the athletes came, Herb Elliott's discussion of his relationship with his mentor was so beautiful and so touching. And the other 4 minute milers, it was like, oh, I was in the wrong period. I could have made so much money. This happened. But for Elliott, it was this soul search that was still part of himself that a person had brought him through athletics. And, when you spend time with Percy, that would be something that would be part of you, for the rest of your life. And the thing that happened to me what was unbelievable is I hit the jogging revolution just right on. One of my really dear friends, the late George Sheehan, maybe a lot of people have read his books, but I wrote a book called Beyond Jogging in 1975. And at that point, in the New York Times bestseller list, there was 4 running books. And the running just kind of took off. Jim Fix's book, The Complete Book of Running, George Sheehan's book, my book. There was a book called The Zen of Running. It was, and running became this whole fashionable thing to do, and I became a fashionable coach, and it was amazing. But I came to Atlanta and I started coaching athletes because I always felt that if I didn't do that, my classical training that I had with Sarity and Igloy and the things I'd learned from Michael Murphy about sport and the yoga of sport, and all these tomes of books that he's written on, the future of the body and different things that I would be amiss if I didn't try that. So I started I trained at Georgia Tech. We had some great kids. At one point we had Coy McCoy from Alabama, and we brought back, it was a golden age in Atlanta for high school miling, and we brought back all the kids that had won the state championship, Eric Smith and Clint Prouty and all these people, and Alan Drofsky, who's the coach now at Georgia Tech. And we had a powerhouse. We had 2 or 3 guys ranked in the top aspect of track and field news. And it was really an exciting time. And then I met the recently late Dr. Sid Williams, who had this vision for Life University. And, we're the only team that we had 5 runners with 24 minutes on cross country in the old course out there by the hospital. But what happened with me also is that I was been infatuated with Kenya, and through good friends, Michael Boyd and other people, I got to spend a lot of time in Kenya. There was a professor at Life University, an anatomy professor, Dr. Mango, and he and I became very good friends, and we recruited, the famous runners that were part of Life College and Life University, Sammy Niamongo, Silent Masoe, and there from probably 1997 to 2002, we did things that no one else ever did. We won the Triple Crown. We're the only team that have done that. We went cross-country, indoor and outdoor. I had a chance to coach Charlie Marcella, who is a Sicilian kid from University of Indiana, who at one point when I was coaching him, he had the fastest time in the world in the 1,500 meters. And so it keeps on going on. I coach a lady now, Leslie Chaplin, who won the world 800 meters in the Masters a few years ago and just won the national championships last week. But I think the biggest thing in my interest right now in terms of the research is things that we talk about, Ian, about the mental side of sport. And I have a dear colleague at Princeton University. I ended up getting my PhD at a very well-known research university in France, outside of Paris, Lille. And we're working on really zoning in on the mental aspects of sport, and not only zoning in, but being able to find in the brain. And this is the current research that we're doing, where exactly in the brain the different types of sports emanate, whether it's a rotational sport, an individual sport. And Ian, you and I have had these great conversations that I've shared with David, and we laugh about it, that jumping probably is the most primordial activity that man has done, walking, jumping, running, and it has a deep groove in the brain. If we can find that groove, we can train it to be more efficient. So maybe someone will jump 30 feet one day in the long jump because they can mentally train the exact part in their brain that's been jumping for since the beginning of time.
And you're absolutely right, Mike. I was sitting here as you were talking, looking at doing some research here on the internet, and there's millions of books about the mental training of sport. And as a coach, and this is where science meets coaching, because as the great Dave Martin told me one day, scientists ain't coaches and coaches ain't scientists. So
right.
In the mental edge, or bringing the mental aspect of sport and bringing it down to a level where, a coach like myself can understand and implement it and, help the athlete overcome whatever challenges they have. How is it your program can help me as a coach do that?
Well, that's the one thing that Michael Murphy was great at, in popularizing and bringing things to the level of understanding. And you and I have been working on this language, Ian, and you're really a master at wordsmithing. I'm really impressed. We have this workshop that you and I are doing together next month, imagining yourself on the podium. I thought that was a wonderful idea. And what it is, it's like there's so much depth of history in mental awareness, and there's so much technology that I feel like my friend at Princeton and I are making a presentation in China in July. And we feel on the scientific and the research part that we've made some real advances. Because even some of the research is not so certain about the effectiveness of the mental training. So as we've been doing is making a language, creating a language that's simple enough for the coach and the athlete to understand and to apply it in a systematic, periodic way through the athlete's season, so that each year, in a kind of cyclical way, they go through the stages, and the coach has a deep, an understanding. Works like the coach can become kind of like the sports psychologist, and that's really the best thing that I think happens. I mean, I was the sports psychologist for our team, and it's working with coaches to give them very, very simple tools and methods that are helpful to them. Like when we had the round table, there was this sprint coach from California that was on the round table, and we were talking about in mental training how to get the athlete to visualize, when they come up out of the blocks, when to go through the different stages. So it's making it simple and using simple language and image, but also that simplicity having its roots in solid research and the sense that when sport is done in a way that's deeply satisfying as a person, as Percy talked about, Percy Cerity, then things combine to make it the most satisfying activity that we as coaches, we know when we get in certain situations and our athletes are doing well personally and physically, that there's nothing that makes us happier and is a deeper experience.
Now, let's talk. Now, Mike, let me look at this. There's three words that I always come into mind when I'm dealing with my athletes. It's the 4 C's, I call them. It's concentration, it's confidence, it's control, and it's commitment. Now, we know that in establishing, or at least in the ballistic sports, one of my things is I always say all superstars have this inherent and built-in rhythm. And I guess technically that's really, developing some type of neurological response. So when I hurdle, it's X amount of steps. I know I'm taking 3 steps between the hurdles. I know I'm taking 7 steps. I'm taking 5 at the end. So it's a fixed number of steps. And so as a coach, I try to drill into their neurological system a set of rhythm that will set them up for some type of success. And I'm always looking for feedback from them. How close did you get to that pattern that we have set? Almost like that computer programmer going in and programming their neurological system, as well as the physiological system that helps them either support that rhythm. So let's talk about C, the first one, which is concentration. How can this program dial in and help me make my athletes concentrate?
Well, this is the great thing, Ian, is that what we've found out through science is that all sports have different arousal levels. If you're a golfer, that's a different arousal than if you're a football player. And what you said was the one word you said that was really enchanting was rhythm. You're trying to teach your hurdlers and jumpers, to get into that kind of flow and rhythm of movement. It's much more, in a sense, as I think about it, much more interesting coaching than the running when you're just doing the same kind of thing all the time. But the concentration is awareness, and one of the things about mental training and relaxation and calmness is to know yourself, and so that happens by gaining composure. So, even the conversation we had at the round table, we talked to the coach, if you want to get visualizing those steps, doing it physically, going back and visualizing it, and visualizing it with concentration and relaxation, because we all know the great athletes, Muhammad Ali's or people we watch. The great thing is that they're so fluid and they're so concentrated. So I really like the 4 C's because they are a periodic idea that you start with concentration. Concentration means that, like in a sprint or jump, it's only about 7 or 8 seconds down the runway and into the jump, and visualizing that in your mind with the arousal that you need. You need a different arousal to run the marathon than you do for the jumps or sprints, and the right concentration for the event that you're attempting to master is the very first step.
Now, let me go back to, I know your background is endurance runners. So in your endurance runners, we're working with our endurance athletes to set up a pace.
Right.
So in that pace, there's a rhythm of that pace.
Yes.
How often do endurance coaches talk to, in other words, if I'm going to run a 5-minute mile, if I'm running a 5K and my goal is to run a 5-minute mile or what have you, how do we ingrain the same type of thought into that endurance athlete? So this is the tempo of a 5-minute mile.
Right. Well, you can feel that tempo inside of yourself. I mean, if you get into visualize the environment, and there's different ways to do this, different techniques, internal, external visualization, technical stuff. But the the main thing is that once you can get a sense internally of what that feels like, what it feels like to run at that pattern, you can actually get so that when you're looking at it in your mind, you're actually feeling and sensing the pace inside of your mind body. And the great thing that mental training people talk about is that if you visualize something, it's almost like doing it. You know, the people that have been locked up in prisons for years and visualized the golf game every day in their mind and then got out and could play really well. So combining that combination of the experience internally and physically, and where they blend with each other. I know when I do mental rehearsal, which is my main specialty, I'd have an athlete, and sometimes a marginal athlete. The reason that my cross-country teams won so many championships isn't because I had Masoe and Sandy Nehemiah go out in front. It's because my fourth and fifth man ran their best races that day. And when they came, down the last straightaway, and they said, Coach, everything we were visualizing in those mental rehearsal things all came back to me. And I had that power and energy we talked about, and I knew those two guys in front of me, I had to beat them to win the national championship. I didn't want to let my team down because, remember, we had all talked about that and sang about that and all these kind of things that that mind-body was working in that capacity. So, when your jumper comes back to you, we're going to find the part in his brain that he had when he jumped over a stream when he was in the Stone Age. I'm really intrigued by that.
Now let's go into, because you kind of touched upon this, that confidence, the result from the comparison of the athlete that makes between the goal and the ability. And the athlete, their self-confidence. Now, as a coach, my challenge is I'm all over the board. I'll have 4 or 5 athletes. Some of them have, real high confidence levels. Some have real low confidence levels. Now, how does that correlate to success? Because I've got to motivate the low, or not me, but they have to motivate themselves to perform high. And I've seen low confident, low self-esteem athletes perform very high on the stage, and I get the T-shirt All-American or the very cocky kid that comes to performance and it changes. So how does, how can this program help that C?
Well, the great thing that Percy Cerutty taught was that the goal is not the time or the championship. It's the development inside of the athlete as artist. I mean, it's amazing that he had that thought, and then also trained the best runner that's ever lived. And when you got that inside your athlete, that it's a journey that you're doing together, it's a learning. It takes a little bit of the stress of the only thing is what your time is and what your place is, and that expansion of the reason for the coach-athlete relationship, I think takes a lot of pressure off of it. You can go back and be as emotional with and emotional connection with your fourth and fifth man in cross country as your champion. So I think that also knowing the person. I mean, one year I coached 3 guys that qualified for the Olympics, and Charlie Marcella and Brian Jager and Bill Kinsella went to Cornell. And all of them were different. For Charlie, it was hearing the national anthem after the big race. For Bill, who was a high-level kind of intellectual, it was more talking about it being an existential experience and talking about art. So, knowing your athlete and trying to get inside of them and giving them confidence. I remember when I was a kid, I was a really good basketball player. I'm obsessive. You can find out about that.
Oh, all right.
Obsessive about stuff. And I used to take like 1,000 shots from every place around. As a little, I could make these 30-foot shots. And I remember my coach came over, this old coach Frank Ruggiero. He was just like a guy from the, Italian guy who was a tough coach. And he said, don't be afraid to shoot that shot. If you miss, don't worry about it. And taking the pressure off the runners and having them do it for a different reason. I mean, in our cross-country teams, our fourth and fifth men were so much in love with our champions that they would kill themselves for it. And somebody else might have said, oh, well, he's getting all the stardom. I ain't even going to run, I remember changing this one guy, Bill Irwin's idea from saying, oh, these Kenyans, why don't they just run in Kenya and send the results over here? And then being our fifth man, we won our first national championship, and coming out of the woods and throwing his gloves off and sprinting towards the finish, and at the end, the other kids kind of bringing him into the circle and back into the group, and that was the reason he did well, not because it was a bigger reason. So I think in track, especially in track and fields, for some reason, the track and field has this real opportunity for the coach and the athlete